Hi, I'm Rashmi Knowles. I'm a Chief Security Architect at RSA, the Security Division of EMC. So I'm going to do a short video on some of the challenges that organizations face when they think about implementing an advanced SOC. Most companies have some kind of SOC, but historically it's actually started off from where they actually started implementing the security infrastructure. And we know that in the challenges that we face today, these traditional SOCs are no longer good enough to help us protect against the risks and threats we see today. So if you think about where organizations first started and think about a time level and the level of risk, then most organizations probably would have started somewhere here where you had basic IT technology, so basic IT infrastructure, and the level of risk was probably reasonably manageable. Once your business starts to mature a little bit and you start investing either in additional technology or other applications and other business processes, then you may start introducing new malware or new risks within your environment. At this point, you may invest in some expertise, so making sure that somebody's actually responsible for managing some of those risks. And again, typically not necessarily a security professional. It could be the IT department that's responsible for managing that level of risk. The next stage, again, as organizations mature, is that you may start investing in some technology. So you may start having either antivirus, firewall, IDS, IPS, any of those different technologies to actually help you manage that level of risk. And you'll see that your risk level is actually manageable as you go through by investing in some of those technologies. The problem is that today we are at an inflection point, because if you think about the new technologies of the third platform, so if you think about cloud, big data, social media and mobility, all of those offer you incredible opportunities as a business, but new opportunities introduce new threats. And the problem is that you introduce much bigger risk within your business. And we know that organizations that will be able to manage that risk will actually be able to innovate and win when it comes to doing business. So we need to think about how can we minimize that risk. Now we know that we can't reduce that risk completely because there's no such thing as zero risk. But the challenge we have is the historical tools that we have here are primarily perimeter based. They are perimeter and signature based, which means that they are actually only looking for something that's bad. Now we know today that malware that's compiled within 1 or 2 hours is typically used to launch serious attacks on businesses. So signature-based technology isn't going to help us reduce that gap significantly. Some of the other reasons where we see a huge rise in that risk is I talked about a little bit about the third platform, but also think about how businesses have changed today. So think about mergers and acquisitions, maybe going into new markets, maybe going into e-commerce platforms, a lot of e-commerce only companies. So there are lots of changes in the way that we do business and the IT technology we use to actually help us deliver that business. We see a big rise in advanced attacks, so very highly targeted, very highly focused, and very highly funded in terms of what the attack is and the information that they're trying to steal. So all of those challenges means that your risk level actually keeps going up, and as organizations we struggle to try and close that gap. So the question is, what is it that we need? What tools and processes do we actually need to help us close that gap? Now we know, as I said earlier, we can't really close that gap completely, but we can look at what can we do to actually help us minimize that risk. So if you look at that as your entire risk level, then there are a number of things that can help us do this. And there's 3 areas that we need to think about. So the first one we need to think about is visibility. To be able to reduce that gap, we need to be able to see everything. So visibility in your entire infrastructure, your endpoints, your network, your databases, your applications, being able to see everything within your organization will help you understand that level of risk. So that's the first thing you need. You need to be able to see everything. The second thing you need is context. And I see context very much as a bit of glue. And it's the glue that joins your IT security processes, your IT infrastructure processes to your business process. So that gives you the level of priority for that particular threat. So for example, if you have a compromise on a file server and you had to shut that server down, then if you only knew the IP address and you had to shut it down, you wouldn't know what impact that would have on your overall business risk. So context becomes really important when you're trying to manage that gap in terms of understanding and prioritizing the effect that some of those new risks and threats will have on your business. If you have both those things, the third thing that actually kind of gives you is expertise, because we know that there is a huge challenge in terms of having the right security skills and resources in most organizations. If you have visibility and if you have context, then the two of those things together help your staff, help your security professionals to focus on what's important, rather than trying to look at 1,000 logs. They can actually look at 10 and say, these are the ones, based on visibility, based on context, the ones that we actually need to investigate and see if we can mitigate that threat. So a result of that is that you actually start minimizing that gap. So you can actually start closing that gap. Now we know, as I said earlier, that you're always going to end up with that gap at the top, but at least if you've got those three things that we talked about, then it'll help you reduce your risk. So tune in to my next video and I'll talk about some of the key technologies, processes and tools that will actually help you close that gap even further.